Did you know that some of the earliest Thanksgivings in American history were celebrations held after massacres of Native men, women, and children, with soldiers parading their severed heads through colonial streets as trophies? Let that sink in. Before we get into this powerful and shocking truth, make sure you like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for Black History Stories 13, where we uncover the real stories America tried to bury. Today we're going deep into a part of American history that is intentionally hidden, whitewashed, and rewritten. The massacres of indigenous people. Massacres where innocent Native men, women, and children were killed by soldiers. Massacres where body parts were taken as proof of victory. And yes, massacres where those parts were displayed publicly to intimidate, silence, and erase an entire people from the land they had lived on for thousands of years. This is not myth, not rumor, not exaggeration. It's documented history, and today we're telling it truthfully. The massacres they never taught you about, for Black History Stories 13. Here is the real, unpolished, historically accurate story of Thanksgiving, not the sugar-coated version we were taught in school. The real history of Thanksgiving, what actually happened. Most Americans grow up hearing that Thanksgiving was a peaceful feast where pilgrims and Native Americans sat down together in harmony. But the truth is far more complicated and much darker. Let's break it down clearly and factually. Part 1. The Wampanoag saved the Pilgrims. Literally, when the Pilgrims, English settlers, arrived in 1620, they were not self-sufficient pioneers. They were starving and unprepared for the New England winter. Nearly half of them died in the first year. The local native people, the Wampanoag Nation, led by Chief Massasoit, showed them how to grow corn, use fish as fertilizer, find edible plants, hunt local animals. Without the Wampanoag, the English settlers would have disappeared. Number 2. The first Thanksgiving was not called Thanksgiving. In the fall of 1621, the Pilgrims held a harvest celebration. That was common in Europe. It wasn't called Thanksgiving, and it wasn't a national holiday. The Wampanoag were not officially invited. Historical accounts suggest that the settlers fired guns in celebration. The Wampanoag heard the gunfire. They showed up with warriors, thinking the Pilgrims were preparing for war. When the misunderstanding was resolved, they stayed and shared food. It was not a celebration of peace between equal partners. It was an uneasy encounter between two groups trying to survive in the same region. Number 3. The word Thanksgiving originally had nothing to do with a feast. Here's the part almost no schools teach. In the 1600s, the English used the term Thanksgiving to refer to a day of prayer after a military victory, not a meal. And tragically, some early Thanksgiving proclamations in New England were issued after massacres of Native people. One example, the 1637 Thanksgiving Governor John Winthrop declared a day of Thanksgiving after hundreds of Pequot men, women, and children were killed by English troops. That's the first official use of the word Thanksgiving connected to the colonies. And it was celebrating Native deaths, not friendship. Number 4. The holiday became national during the Civil War. President Abraham Lincoln made Thanksgiving a national holiday in 1863 during the Civil War. But Lincoln's proclamation had nothing to do with pilgrims, nothing to do with Native Americans, nothing to do with a shared feast. It was meant to unite a divided nation through gratitude and prayer. The Pilgrim story was added later, in the late 1800s, to create a comforting American origin myth. 5. Native Americans. Call it the National Day of Mourning. Since 1970, the United American Indians of New England have observed Thanksgiving as a National Day of Mourning. Because for Native Americans, the holiday represents the beginning of colonization, land theft, broken treaties, forced assimilation, disease brought by Europeans, the near destruction of their populations and culture. For many indigenous families, Thanksgiving is a day to honor ancestors who suffered under colonization and to resist the sanitized version taught in schools. So what's the truth? There was a harvest gathering in 1621, but the peaceful, friendly version most people imagine was created centuries later. The true history of Thanksgiving includes cooperation and sharing, betrayal and violence, survival and resistance, a national holiday reshaped for political unity. It's a mixture of truth, myth-making, and deliberate rewriting of history. The Pequot Massacre of 1637, The Forgotten Holocaust. The story begins in Connecticut, 1637. Before sunrise, English soldiers and their native allies surrounded a Pequot village at Mystic. Families were asleep. Children were still in their beds. Then, without warning, the soldiers set the entire village on fire. When the terrified Pequots ran out of the burning homes, they were killed. In less than an hour, 400 to 700 people were dead, most of them women, children, and elders. And here's the part that absolutely destroys the cute Thanksgiving story we were all taught. The governor declared a day of Thanksgiving following this slaughter. Not the 1621 harvest meal, a Thanksgiving celebration for a massacre. And yes, soldiers took heads and scalps as trophies. It was common practice. Those heads ended up displayed in towns as proof of conquest. King Philip's War, displaying the head of a native king. Fast forward to 1676. This is the war between colonial settlers and several native nations, including the Wampanoag, the same people who once helped the Pilgrims survive. The war's final moment is one of the darkest in American history. The Wampanoag leader Metacom, called King Philip by the English, was killed. His head was cut off, taken back to Plymouth, placed on a spike, and left on display for more than 20 years. It was a message to every native person in the region. Submit, or this will be you. This wasn't an isolated act, it was policy. Scalping bounties. The government paid for native heads. Many colonies and later states passed official scalping laws. These laws paid money for the head or scalp of a native man, a smaller amount for women, even less for children. This happened in Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, New York, Colorado, and California during the gold rush. People became bounty hunters, literally profiting from killing native families. This wasn't frontier violence. It was government-sanctioned extermination. Section 4. The Sand Creek Massacre of 1864, the horror witnessed by Congress, now to Colorado, 1864. A peaceful Cheyenne and Arapaho village flying a white flag, believing they were under U.S. protection. At dawn, U.S. soldiers attacked. Most of the victims were women, children, and elders. And after the killing, soldiers collected body parts. When they returned to Denver, they paraded those parts through the streets as trophies while crowds cheered. This massacre was so brutal that even Congress investigated it and condemned the officers involved. Yet the survivors were never compensated, and the truth was never taught in schools. Section 5. The California Genocide, extermination on paper. In early California, state governors openly announced that native people should be wiped out. Militias were paid by the government to raid villages. Entire communities were destroyed. Children were kidnapped and sold into servitude. Heads and scalps were displayed in towns. California's first governor, Peter Burnett, said, "A war of extermination will continue to be waged until the Indian race becomes extinct," and the state paid for it. Literally. This was genocide, openly discussed, funded, and celebrated. There were many genocides, massacres, forced removals, and extermination campaigns carried out against indigenous nations across what is now the United States. Most of these were deliberate government policies, not random violence. The Trail of Tears, 1830s. Removal by death. March nations affected: Cherokee, Creek, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Seminole. Location: southeast to Oklahoma. The U.S. government forced more than 100,000 native people off their homelands under President Andrew Jackson's Indian Removal Act. Around 15,000 plus died during the forced marches. People were removed at gunpoint. Whole families were uprooted. Many died from exposure, disease, starvation, and exhaustion. This was not relocation. It was ethnic cleansing designed to take native land for white settlers. Number 2, the Yuki Genocide. California, 1850s to 1870s. Nation affected: Yuki, Northern California. Location: Round Valley and surrounding areas. This is one of the least known but most aggressive genocides in U.S. history. State militias hunted Yuki families. Children were kidnapped. Women were enslaved. Men were executed for bounty money. It was so extreme that even some settlers wrote that the Yuki will be exterminated. Their population dropped from 20,000 to fewer than 1,000 within a few decades. Number 3, the Bear River Massacre, 1863. Nation affected: Shoshone. Location: Idaho-Utah border. U.S. soldiers attacked a Shoshone village at dawn. Between 250 to 500 Shoshone were killed. Most were women and children. survivors were forced onto reservations. This is one of the deadliest massacres in Western U.S. history, yet almost never taught. Number 4. The Wounded Knee Massacre, 1890. The end of the Indian Wars, nation affected. Lakota Sioux. Location, South Dakota. U.S. soldiers surrounded a Lakota camp during the suppression of the Ghost Dance spiritual movement. The U.S. opened fire while the Lakota were disarming. Between 250 to 300 Lakota were killed. Many victims were unarmed women and children. The soldiers involved received medals of honor that Native activists are still fighting to have revoked. Number 5. The Gnadenhutten Massacre, 1782. Nation affected, Christian Lenape, Delaware. Location, Ohio. This massacre happened before the U.S. Constitution existed, but it shows the long pattern of violence. Colonial militia killed 96 peaceful Lenape. The Lenape were praying when attacked. Most were women and children. George Washington later referred to some frontier militias as bloodthirsty. Number 6. The Marias Baker Massacre, 1870. Nation affected, Blackfeet. Location, Montana. U.S. soldiers attacked a peaceful Blackfeet village by mistake. They were looking for a different band. Around 173 Blackfeet killed. Most were women and children. Survivors suffered frostbite after being forced into the snow. Even General Sherman admitted it was unjustifiable. Number 7. The Orange County Genocide, California. Nations affected, Tongva, Atchackaman, and Luiseno. Location, Southern California. During mission and early American settlement periods, forced labor, disease, violence, mass village burnings reduced their populations by 90% plus within a couple generations. Number 8. The Colorado War and Sand Creek Massacre, 1864. You already heard this one, but it belongs on the list. Nation affected, Cheyenne and Arapaho. Location, Colorado. Peaceful camp under U.S. protection was attacked. Mostly women and children killed. Soldiers brought body parts to Denver for display. Congress later declared it a massacre. Number 9. The Dakota War Massacre and Mass Execution, 1862. Nation affected, Dakota Sioux. Location, Minnesota. After conflict started, settlers formed death squads. Dakota women and children were interned in concentration-style camps. The U.S. hanged 38 Dakota men, the largest mass execution in U.S. history. Thousands more were expelled from Minnesota. Number 10. The California Gold Rush Genocide, 1848 to 1870s. Nations affected, many, including Miwok, Nisenan, Wintu, Pomo, Yuki, and more. Location, Northern and Central California. California's first governor openly called for extermination. The state paid militias for killing Native families, reimbursed campaigns to wipe out villages, allowed kidnapping and enslavement of Native children. Historian Benjamin Madley estimates that between 9,000 and 16,000 Native Californians were killed by settlers and militias. The pattern of genocide was nationwide. These genocides were not isolated events. They were government-sponsored, church-supported, resource-driven, legalized through legislatures, justified through racism and manifest destiny ideology. In many cases, the government admitted years later that these actions were extermination. Why this history is hidden? These massacres are not taught because they expose the truth about how America was really built. They shatter the myth of peaceful settlement. They reveal that colonization involved terror and ethnic cleansing. They challenge the myth of Thanksgiving and American innocence. This is why Native Americans today call Thanksgiving the National Day of Mourning. Not because they hate celebration, but because the holiday has been used to erase their suffering. History has two versions, the one that's comfortable and the one that's true. Here at Black History Stories 13, we tell the truth, even when it's painful, even when it's hidden, and especially when it was never meant to be told. If you learned something today, if this opened your eyes, make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and tell your friends and family to watch this video. Because history that is hidden is history that can be repeated. Thank you for watching Black History Stories 13.